Good afternoon. Happy to see a nice crowd this afternoon. Welcome. My name is Leanne Potter, and I direct the Office of Learning and Innovation at the Library of Congress. And it is really my pleasure to welcome you to the teen stage this afternoon. And more importantly, of course, welcome you to the 19th Annual National Book Festival, sponsored by the Library of Congress. I have a little script I need to read. But before I do, I want to tell you about a little experience I just had. I took a break. I got to open the purple stage this morning, which was great fun. Were any of you there? Awesome. Did those of you who weren't there, did you hear us open the purple stage? We were a little loud. It was good. So between opening the purple stage and coming here, I walked over to a coffee shop to take a little bit of a gather my thoughts break, and came back, and as I was crossing the street, I overheard a conversation between a boy of about 10 years old and his mom. And they were coming into the book festival, and the young man says to his mom, "Hey mom, do you have our tickets?" And she said, "We don't need any, it's free. Anybody can go." And he's like, "Huh, that's cool." And I thought, that's fabulous. What the 10-year-old boy said is absolutely true. It is cool. And that's sort of where my script begins. So bear with me, but I hope you'll sort of let that 10-year-old's comment resonate. This festival is, in fact, free of charge, thanks to the generosity of donors, large and small. If you wish to make a donation, please do so on the festival app under the word donate. It's on the app's homepage. We really do appreciate your support for this great celebration of books and reading. It's pretty extraordinary that this is a free event. We hope this day inspires you to make use of the incomparable resources of the Library of Congress and know that the Library of Congress is something, I don't want to say it's a misnomer, but not only is it the Library of Congress, but it is also your national library. And making good use of it is absolutely not an opportunity, but perhaps a responsibility that we all have. We are thrilled to announce that the library's brand new National Book Festival Presents series is going to begin later actually in the middle of September, on September 11th. It will extend the reach of our festival with more exciting book events at the library. Please check the library's website, loc.gov, for updates on all of the programming for children as well as adults, and how ticketing is going to work for each one. We welcome your questions at the end of our conversation this afternoon. And if you have questions specifically for the author, please make your questions brief and to the point. And please remember that you are giving us permission to use your question in the webcast. So years and years from now, your children and grandchildren can see the questions that you asked. And finally, I ask you to turn off or at least mute your cell phones. Thank you very much. Okay, now I get to the really fun introductions. Thank you. It is my pleasure to serve as the moderator for this special conversation entitled Finding Their Voices, and to welcome our two authors, Mitali Perkins and Misa Sugiura. You guys can clap if you want to. We're going to like this audience. Okay. Mitali Perkins has written many novels for young readers, including Rickshaw Girl, that you may know is becoming a movie. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. A New York Public Library Top 100 book, Bamboo People, an American Library Association Top 10 young adult novel, and You Bring the Distant Near, which was a Walter Honor book, a National Book Award nominee, and received 6-starred reviews. Perkins was born in India and has lived in Bangladesh, England, Thailand, Mexico, Cameroon, and Ghana. Her new book is Forward Me Back to You, published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Deep breath. Misa Sugiura's ancestors include a poet, a priestess, a samurai, and a stowaway. She grew up in Northfield, Illinois, and went to college on the East Coast. She lived in Japan for 3 years before moving to the Silicon Valley and became a high school English teacher. She is the author of the award-winning It's Not Like It's a Secret, and her new book, This Time Will Be Different. Help me welcome Mitali and Misa. All right, so I thought we would start our conversation this afternoon by me just asking the two of you to tell us a little bit about your new books and focus your descriptions on some of the characters, and then we'll lead our conversation from there. Mitali, do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
It's good to see you all this afternoon. My book, Forward Me, Back to You. I don't know if any of you have seen some of your friends who have experienced a significant trauma, and after they grieve, they begin to start some sort of a GoFundMe or a fundraiser that specifically focuses on moving forward through helping other people. Have you seen that in your experience? People trying to recover from their personal traumas by leaning into giving. That always intrigued me as a way to recover from trauma. So this story, Forward Me, Back to You, is about two teens. Kat, who grew up in Oakland, she's grown up with a single mom. We both have that in common in our novels. And Ravi, or Robin, as is his American name, is adopted from Kolkata, which is where I was born. And they meet in Boston, and they are both considering the invitation to go work for the summer with an anti-trafficking organization in Kolkata. And neither of them really wants to go. But they meet a woman named Grandma V, and she too has suffered her trauma, and she introduces them to this principle that she calls golden ruling. And it's akin to what I talked about in the beginning when I introduced the book. It's about loving your neighbor as yourself, and that is one way to move forward when you've experienced trauma, as both Kat and Ravi have. Ravi was abandoned and now adopted by white parents, and so he's dealing both with the loss of his biological family as well as the loss of his ethnic identity. What does it mean to be Bengali when you have two white parents? And Kat also is dealing with her own particular trauma, which involves a stairwell incident, and she's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion in Northern California. So the book has a lot of that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in it. That was fun to research. And it's interesting because it's about trauma, but it's about hope, and it has a little bit of a Bollywood vibe in it. I can't quite help putting in a little bit of humor, and that's just my voice, talking about voice. So when you try to write about these issues like trafficking, abandonment, trauma, and you try to put in Bollywood dancing and singing and humor, that's challenging, and that was fun to write. So.
Outstanding. Good summary. Yeah. All right, Misa.
Yes, I just want to say that I love that Ravi looks like a movie star, but he doesn't know that he looks like a movie star until he goes to India, which I think is so telling.
Right, we talked about how to write hot Asian guys.
Yeah.
Both of us have that in common.
Yes. So yeah, there's this like handsome Asian boy in my book too. That was something I did on purpose, because I didn't see a lot of those in books or movies. So anyway, but the actual main character is a girl named CJ Katsuyama, and she has been sort of struggling under the weight of her mother's expectations. Her mother is this like super high-powered venture capitalist, which is the people who are in charge of giving money to startups in Silicon Valley. And so her mother's expectations and the expectations sort of the history of her family, which goes back to the Japanese-American internment, where her family was sent to internment camps and had to sell their property. This was quite common, just for pennies on the dollar, because they had 2 or 3 weeks to get there would be an announcement, all right, this community is going to be sent to a camp in 3 weeks, but no one knew when that was going to happen until the announcement went up. And then they would have 2 or 3 weeks to just sell everything or find someone to take care of everything. So this happened to her family. They had to sell everything. And then after they came back from the camps, they worked and worked and worked and earned it all back and bought it all back. So sort of the pressure of this history is on her shoulders. And she just can't seem to live up to any of that. And plus the sort of the minority thing. Everyone expects her to be kind of killing it at school and everything. And she's not. And she sort of finds refuge in her family-owned flower shop, which her aunt runs. And she's propelled into action when her mother, who is just all about moving on, moving forward, because that's what we do in Silicon Valley, we just look to the future. She wants to sell the flower shop to the very family who sort of cheated them out of it many years ago. And it gets more complicated from there. And there's this like cute Asian boy, and there's some kissing and stuff like that too.
Great. One of my favorite characters.
That's great. So as we're thinking about how you found the voices of your characters, I was doing a little research before this to come up with, okay, if I were teaching English, how would I introduce voice to my students? And I found an exercise that I thought was actually pretty good, and it had to do with adjectives. So this was the activity. I'm going to ask you guys to give me the adjectives that describe your characters. Okay. So the exercise was, if you could describe yourself in 3 adjectives, what adjectives would they be? And then the second part of that was, that, I guess the pointed question is this how you talk? So if I think that I'm this, this, and this, is that how do my words reflect that? And so that's my question for you, is what 3, isn't that good?
That's really good.
I thought it was really good too. I was like, oh, I could use
feel
that.
like I need to write that down.
I have a journal for
I
hours.
saw some people jotting down notes, which I'm like, yeah, okay, we know what your English students are doing next week. It's good. Yeah. So how about for Ravi? What 3 adjectives?
Okay. Well, he's very kind.
Okay.
But at the beginning of the story, he's a little numb.
Oh, good word.
And I would say numb/meek,
Okay.
unable to express the full range of his emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the third adjective is, I said kind, I said meek. The third would be that he is passionate about justice.
Ooh,
Yeah, I think he's passionate about being fair, things being fair and things being right.
that's good. It's really good. Okay. And I'm going to come back to a question about the way you said at the beginning and then at the end. So
Okay, yeah.
So it's coming.
Right.
So Misa, how about for CJ?
So I think she would describe herself as loyal and I think she sees herself also as she sees herself as compassionate.
Okay.
And oh gosh.
It's hard because they're complicated.
I
isn't it?
know.
They change.
Yeah, right? Yeah, so in the beginning, like loyal, compassionate, and, or like a good friend. Yeah. I don't know if that goes with compassionate.
That's good.
Yeah, and determined.
Okay, very good. And then how about Kat?
Kat, I have 2 characters, as I said. Kat would be fierce, very private, and let's see, how do you say, like solitary? She's like self-reliant. Fierce, private, and self-reliant.
Awesome. Okay. So, how does someone who is fierce, private, and self-reliant become good friends with someone who is kind, numb, and passionate about justice?
Right. One of my favorite things was writing a friendship between a guy and a girl. I have really good friends who are guys, and that didn't have to have that romantic edge to it. So I loved that in my book I was able to have their friendship be the crux of what led to their healing. Yeah. I think they needed each other, particularly because of those differences. Ravi needed to step up and be fierce and be self-reliant and be protective of himself. And I think Kat needed to grow in her heart of kindness, her passion for justice. So I think in that way, their opposites led to the fact that they become their friendship itself becomes the reason why they're able to move forward. So both of the fact they're so opposite. Nice. Yeah, but had to write 2 characters, which was quite challenging but fun.
Yeah, no, it's good. And it makes me wonder a little bit about how, I guess, the relationship between our own voice and the voices we're listening to, and how the voices we listen to influence our own voice. So, in your novel, Misa, whose voices is CJ listening to?
Oh my gosh. It takes a while for her to really hear her own voice, right?
Because there's so many other voices.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
So for sure, it's her mother's voice.
Okay.
And just so that, people always are like, so, like, who are you? And CJ's mom, I'm CJ's mom, just so everyone, like, I'm CJ and I'm also her mom, but like, yeah, it's the mother who's been just trying and trying and trying to get CJ to be a success. Yeah. And she's feeling really ashamed of not having lived up to that. Another voice is her aunt, who is the counterbalance, the counterpoint to her mom, saying, just the world is full of love and romance, and just be yourself, and try to look for what's beautiful. And I think she's been coached to value her mother's voice more than her aunt's voice for quite a long time, because her mother is such a strong personality. And yeah, and and then society's voice too, just its expectations of her.
And her location too, maybe.
Yes, Silicon Valley. It's just crazy. It's all about, maybe even here, like Metro DC area, I would imagine it's pretty achievement oriented. Yes. And that's, I wanted to write about that a little bit too.
I loved what you said about you being both the voice of CJ and the voice of her mom, because as authors, how do you hear your own voice in the novels you write? And how do you, or do you find yourself listening to other voices as you're writing the voices of your characters?
I think voice was one of the beauties of your novel. And I felt like I could hear your voice because there's such humor in CJ's internal voice. So it made me want to get to know you better, because I thought, if she's as funny as CJ, I want to get to know her. I think essentially all my characters are me. I know that sounds really self-absorbed, but that's the voice that I have to give the world. And so, but of course, my sons, like Ravi, are adopted. And so I did a lot of listening to adoptees, because I am not adopted. I had the ethnic loss. When you're an immigrant, you lose that piece. How Bengali am I? When people see me as South Asian, but not Bengali. And then some people would just say I'm brown. So when you immigrate, there's always that ethnic loss. And I could do that part for him. But when it came to the adoptee loss, I had to listen to lots of voices during that season of research. And especially my own two beloved little Ravis. So in a way, Ravi's the character that probably the two people on Earth, well, maybe 2 of 5 people on Earth that I love the most. So.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, I was so wrapped up in your answer. What was the question again?
I was asking about your own voice. Oh. And when you're writing or when you read what you've written, is your voice there?
Okay. Yes. I actually don't think I'm as funny in person as CJ, because I'm the person who thinks of the jokes afterwards, right? Like I'm not fast on my feet, so that's why I love to write, because I can sort of, I feel like I'm funny inside. It just doesn't always come out. So this is where I just get to unleash and be snarky and sort of snappy,
Snarky and snap.
And let's see, and the like, for example, her mother, Mimi, who. Okay, here's a little clue for everybody. Misa, Mimi was my father's nickname for me, so that's why I gave her that nickname. She's always saying things like, you can do better. You just have to want it. You just have to have a vision. You just have to be motivated, and that's sort of the worst is not really fair, but that's my voice. That's the things I always want to say to my son, who's tired of hearing it.
So when he reads your novel, will he hear your voice?
He absolutely will be like, "Oh my God, Mom!"
But see, that's good. That's a real self-awareness thing, right?
And in fact, some of the arguments CJ has with her mom are like verbatim the same arguments that I've had with my son.
That's
so
great. That's great.
So my son's
write what we know, right?
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. So you both have talked a little bit about the research that goes into your writing. Can you speak a little bit more about that? About what in writing these 2 novels in particular, what additional research did you need to do in order to feed these voices so that they could be as authentic as they are?
Do you want to start?
Man, yeah, because you've had to do a lot of research, I imagine. Yeah. So, well, yeah, it was a long, long time ago, but I wrote my college thesis about the literature of the Japanese American internment, so the literature that came out of it. So that like history part was stuff I already knew about. If any of you are interested, there's this amazing website called Densho, DENSHO, I think like .org,
Yeah.
that has interviews and documents and stories and all of the details. So I did some preliminary research about the internment there because I did address the history. And I had to learn a little bit about the ins and outs of purchasing property and investment banking and how much money can believably change hands. And I always make sure to touch base with a few teenagers to make sure that my language is all right, that the texts are making sense, that things are believable, and there's a LGBTQ subplot that I really love, and my teenage years, being queer in my teenage years is very, very different from being queer today in the Silicon Valley. So I always have to touch base with a few queer teens to make sure that, is this what happens? Is this how people feel?
Authentic.
Yeah.
It's good. Good.
So.
A long time ago, there was a book that won the national, or was nominated for the National Book Award. It was about trafficking in Kolkata, and I loved the book. But there was one issue I had with it at the end of the book. This girl is saved from being trafficked, and the character that saves her is called the American. And I have first cousins who work very closely that are Bengali in Kolkata who work in anti-trafficking organizations. So it was a beautiful book. Like every book, my books have flaws, every book has a flaw. But that was a flaw I always wanted to write about. I wanted to highlight the work that people are doing in Kolkata, Bengalis, to help fight this injustice. But in this book, all my whole career, I've been writing a long time. I always like to say I've been rejected a long time, so I'm still writing my next novel. But I've seen some of these themes and tropes come out in fiction, like the outside savior theme that I'm talking about, or the theme of, there's just a lot of things that I got to turn, like if you've heard of this word, the magical Negro theme, where, like, for example, think of Morgan Freeman, who pops in a movie and sort of solves the problem and then exits without any backstory. So these are things that have bothered me in literature for a long time. So in this book, I got to play with that. I got to have Grandma V, who is an immigrant from Sierra Leone, but instead of just being a magical person who appears and solves the problem, we actually get to know her story, her backstory, and her whole reason why she became a healer. So, and I got to play with the fact that these teens want to go and help these girls get free from trafficking, but they actually can't do that because that's not their role. So that was really fun. And so I've done work in Kolkata. I've visited those organizations. I've met the girls. As I said, I've raised 2 adoptees. I've listened to a ton of adoptee voices. This was probably my most researched of all my novels because I wanted to get that. Since I was turning these tropes and themes on their heads, I wanted to be sure that there was the research that backed it up.
Yeah. No, I appreciate what both of you said about your research in terms of you're getting to know authentic voices in both cases, whether they're authentic voices of people who are present today or voices that are present in primary source materials. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned the Densho group. Mm-hmm. We're familiar with them at the library.
Oh, right,
Yeah, great. Well, I'm looking at my watch, and it's like about 1:45, and that means it's time for some questions from our audience, and I welcome you to use those 2 microphones, and I love it. Somebody's already jumped up and is ready. And if you want to say your name and then address either Misa or Mitali or both of them, you certainly may.
So this question is directed to both of you. So I've noticed online in the book community, at least, in terms of publishing within the past year or so, there's been a lot more Own Voices Asian books, as well as more readathons targeted towards Asian main characters. And I was wondering if you 2 have noticed this shift online or in your own publishing careers.
Do you want to?
Absolutely. Gosh, when I started, it was the market won't bear my books. I got a lot of the rejections I got probably were because my books were bad, but partly, I mean, hopefully I've gotten better, but partly it's because I'd hear things like, well, we don't really have that community, that representation in the community. The idea that my books were particularly for Asian readers only, as opposed to the wider audience. Well, that myth of the market has been completely exposed as false, thanks to a lot of these best-selling books now, and I'm so grateful for that, grateful for We Need Diverse Books and the pushback, because now my career feels totally different. It's like a dream. I mean, this is your third book, right? Or
Just my second.
So seeing from when I started to now, that whole Own Voices thing, the danger, I think, though, is that we have to really be careful about that Own Voices hashtag with fiction, because unless you're writing memoir, all fiction crosses borders. So just because you're writing about your own culture doesn't give you a free pass to just write without the integrity of your research and that you need to do. It doesn't give you that just because I'm Own Voices. I'm Bengali, so I can write whatever I want. And we've seen problems with that, where people have made mistakes in their own. But as I said before, every one of us is flawed. All our books are going to be flawed, but all fiction crosses borders. Or it's memoir. So in a sense, no fiction is Own Voices. So I'd balance that with gratitude for the movement that's widened the market with a little bit of wisdom that fiction is going to be flawed and it's going to cross borders, but we can still do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good, thank you.
Did you want to?
Oh, no, I'm what she said, right?
That's great. Very good. Thank you. All right. How about one over here? And we'll just alternate. Yes.
Hi, I'm Noah.
Hi, Noah.
And my question is just, how do you come up with the titles for your books?
Excellent question.
This was your last line.
Mine was my last line, yes. And I don't remember if I wrote the last line first, or if I wrote the title of the novel first. Yeah, so before, let's see, my very first title for this book was something. It was something like "Nothing Will Change" or something.
Nothing ever changes.
It was not quite as or things. Yeah, it was similar theme, but not as positive. And actually, for my first book, I started off with a title that my editor didn't like, and so she's like, "Can you think of something else?" And I made a list of 100 different titles, and I picked my top 8, and I gave them to her, and she's like, "Let's just make it this." And it was this. It's not like it's a secret, which was something someone says in the book.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's great. It's actually making me think, wouldn't that be kind of a fun Twitter thing, like titles of books that could have been?
Could have been, right? Well, they have that. Like they throw in, yeah. So I'm bad. I'm terrible at titles. Terrible. Yeah. Thankfully for my editors, the book before this was called "You Bring the Distant Near," and that's more memoir than any of my books I've written. And the original title was terrible. It was called Borderlines. So boring. So, there's a poet called Rabindranath Tagore who won the Nobel Prize from Bengal, and he's written tons of poems. So my editor said, "I'll come up with something better, Mitali." So she went away for the weekend. She read thousands of poems he's written. She read probably about 20 of them, and she said, "I've got the title." And she came back to me and said, "I think we should call it You Bring the Distant Near." Now my heart skipped a beat because my husband was the first non-Bengali to enter the family, the family. So at our wedding, my grandfather, back in Kolkata, sent us a poem to be read in our wedding to welcome him, and that poem was "You Bring the Distant Near." So,
okay, who got goosebumps?
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
So Forward Me Back to You was an attempt to match You Bring the Distant Near, Forward Me Back to You, but it's really about two teens who love the movies. That's their shared thing. They love superhero movies. And when you can forward a movie, but you can't do that with real life. You can't fast forward, you can't press rewind. So it was a little play on that. But thanks for that question, because titles, we should have an app, title generator app. Yeah. I would pay a lot of money for a good title generator app.
Well, Mitali, on your website, don't you have that quote, front and center?
Yes, You Bring the Distant.
Look at our website, it's front and center. That's a great question.
Yes.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
Hi, so my name is Shrina, and I'm actually Bengali myself,
Yay.
so yeah, right. So
Kemun Bangla bolte parish?
আমি বাংলা বলতে
Oh,
পারি।
great. So I said, do you still speak Bangla? And she came through. Good job.
Yeah, I actually improved a lot on this. So my question is, short story about me. When I was in elementary school, I used to be bullied for being Indian, and I was just wondering, like, in both of your stories, do you see that sort of discrimination happen to your characters? Because to me, being Bengali and being Indian, since I am a second-generation immigrant, like my parents immigrated here, it sometimes feels hard to look back at my family and try to connect with them when I, live in America. It's hard to feel emotionally connected to them, and like, bullied. So.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. CJ is Asian in a community with a lot of Asian Americans. So in this book, I didn't really talk about that. There's a moment where someone says something, but she manages to fight back. My first book actually addresses that idea head on, where it's not outright bullying, but a lot of microaggressions, like, they're dancing to the Beach Boys' California Girls, and the Midwest farmer's daughter is, and she's like, yeah, and kids are like, why, you don't look like a Midwest farmer's daughter, like that kind of thing. But I don't know. Yeah. So I think, but
Yes.
your book is much more.
I
About
loved that she wasn't. I love that she had a very proud ethnic identity. So yeah, I moved to California in the 7th grade, and it was an born in the USA, all white school. And so the principal introduced me to the whole school at once in front of the whole school in the assembly and said, "We have a new student from Asia. Make her feel welcome." Oh my gosh, nobody talked to me for weeks and weeks, and I was trying desperately to fit in. I talk about the hyphenated life. You know how you see yourself as Bengali American, and your question expressed both the disconnect from the American side and the disconnect from the Bengali side, right? So these years that you're in are the toughest because you're trying to learn that we call code switching. So when you're with your grandma, your didu, or your nani, you're totally leaning into your Bengali side, and you're striving for cultural fluency. But when you're with your American friends, you're like, hey, yeah, what's going on with I don't know, I'm so unhip now. My kids are old, but you're just American pop culture, right? But you're learning both languages, you're learning both cultures, and even though it's hard, and you're getting rejection here, and you're feeling like you don't fit in there, that skill that you're learning around your hyphen, that code switching skill, that's gonna last you a lifetime. You're gonna be able to cross borders so fluidly for the rest of your life beyond anyone who doesn't have a hyphen. So if you can survive, because it is fiery, I'm not saying it's not fiery. The only people who reached out to me after that 7th grade was this group of 7th grade boys, 5 of them, and they were really nerds, I could tell. But they walked up to me, they were nervous, and they said, hey, we want you to eat lunch with us. And I was like, what? 7th grade boys? Well, it turns out these were the Trekkies of the school, and so there were 5 of them. They acted out the show the next day after the... And so there was one character that was missing, and that was Lieutenant Uhura. So they said, would you be our Uhura? That was how crazy it was. So you're code switching. I can see it. You're doing a great job. Your Bangla's spot on. You're following through on that. Keep pushing for both fluency, but especially that code switching dance you're doing, that's going to serve you. It's people who don't do that, I think, that are stunted.
Yeah.
The more borders you're crossing now, the harder it is, the better it's going to be. So survive, hang in there. It's going to pay off.
Yeah. Right. I just want to add to that. Like this whole idea of like being bicultural is often seen, especially by people who are on like one side as an either or situation. And yeah, I've been like think about it as both and, right? Yes. You can be both. You don't have to be one or the other. So.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, next question.
So my question is actually an excellent piggyback to that.
Oh, good.
Because I was thinking a lot about Misa, your book, It's Not Like It's a Secret, and how your characters always had such intersectionality in their identities. And it wasn't just about her being gay. It wasn't just about her being Asian. It was about a whole big slew of things. And so I was curious about how you select the issues, so to speak, for your characters.
I don't know. I think it's they just happen. I mean, if I wanted to write, I decided to focus on an Asian queer character, mostly because when I decided to write a book, I was just reading, and all the Asian characters were straight, and all the queer characters were white, and so that's where that came from. I just like, well, there needs to be a book where someone's both. And that's where that voice came from. And I don't think you can write a book about anything, even being white, without somehow, somewhere addressing that issue, even if it's just a line or a paragraph somewhere.
Well, that was,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, on this side.
Yes. It seems to me the process of writing is well suited to being an introvert, but all the research that you described sounds like a really extroverted thing. And do you actually have that dilemma? Are you like, how do you deal with the side that's more uncomfortable? Like, I love being by myself, but I have to go out and talk to all these people. Or, I love talking to people, but I put myself in this little dark
Yes.
room to get it all down on paper.
Right. How many of you are really introverted in the room? So you replenish by being alone, right? Is that true for you?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is this festival. I go to a lot of these conferences and festivals, and being down there with all those, I call it the psychic shriek of all the people. That's hard as an introvert. I'm very, very introverted. But I also love people. I think being an introvert doesn't let you off the hook for being in relationships with people and loving people. So it's a question of balance and, self-care. And so I think we're never off the hook to really be in deep relationships with people. So that's a non-negotiable. But I do reply, like in the hotel room, my first appointment was 12 this morning. I was like, 11:20, I could stay in my hotel room till 11:20. That's how, yeah. So thanks, that's definitely the artistic life. But I once had heard Mary Oliver speak, who's a poet. We just recently lost her. I asked her that question from the floor. I said, how does a poet, and my question was more about justice. How does a poet engage with justice if you're spending all these hours writing and there's all these hungry people in the world? How do you justify that? And she talked about how the role of art in bringing change into the human heart. And you got to believe that. You have to have that big vision that what you're writing is going to matter in the world when it comes to bringing justice and love.
Very well done. Anything?
Oh, me. Sorry. I was just so rapt.
Introverted, extroverted. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's that first phone call, that first email's not so hard. The first phone call is really tough. But I find that going out there with a purpose, there's things I really want to find out. I already have my questions all set to go, right? I spend a lot of time writing the questions. So it's like I've got a script, and people always love to talk about themselves, like answering your question.
Well, and they're flattered.
Yes, exactly. So I find that once you sit down and you've got the questions, it kind of goes from there, and so it's easier for me that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi. I'm Joanna. Hi.
Hello.
Did you guys write as teens?
I did not. I didn't think I had anything to say. So I want to encourage. I'm so amazed by all of you.
That's sad.
Yeah, it was. But anyway. But now I do.
I wrote like a crazy person. I was always scribbling in journals, and my journals were always secret. And I had very much like a Mimi-like mom. And I hate to generalize, but she was a classic Bengali immigrant mom. So she wanted to know what I was writing about. So I'm always guarding but I wrote like crazy. I had pink paper. I am old, people, so I wrote on a typewriter when I was a teenager, which really is that sound. Yeah. So I wrote all the time on my old typewriter, faded pink paper, and just poems and stories constantly.
Did you have any mentors or some kind of education to help you further
No, I just read like crazy. I was such an avid reader. I'd go to the library. My relaxation to this day, unfortunately, is reading and eating at the same time by myself. Oh my God. So bad. I'm really working on that vice. But so I did that all the time. I just read and I reread. If you think of a book that you reread, that book's going to go deep, right? So I read, and I would say the mentors were the writers that I reread.
Yeah.
So I constantly went to the library all the time, just read like a crazy person, and wrote.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say Google is actually, I mean, I Googled how to write a book. That's what and that's, you can do it that way.
You too can do that.
Yes.
And I am sorry to say that our time is up, but I see two young ladies at the mics, and so I'm going to say that we're going to wrap this up. We're all going to applaud, and then if you two want to come up and ask your questions, that would be great. And the rest of you, enjoy the rest of the book festival. Thank you again for being here.
Yes,
thank you again, Mitali and Misa. Really.